What's up, everyone? This is Bryan from the Exact IT Solutions YouTube channel, and welcome to another video where we educate you about all the things around cybersecurity and what you can do to protect yourself, your business, or the place that you work. Today, we're going to talk about a recent testimony that the CEO of the Colonial pipeline did in front of the U.S. Senate, where he talked about their recent cyber attack. And there was a lot of good things to come out of that interview that I want to cover in this video. But before I jump into that, remember, I don't bore you with ads on this channel. I don't throw commercials in the middle of my content. Now, if you're watching on YouTube free, you're going to see commercials from YouTube. But they're not from us. And I don't do sponsorships and ask you to buy my stuff and head over to Patreon. But there is a fee to watch this content. And the only thing that I ask is that you remember to hit the like button if I enlightened you or entertained you or educated you in any way, shape, or form. If something positive came out of you watching this content today, just hit that like button for us. It helps YouTube show it to other people, and other people find this content by the number of times that thumbs up button gets hit. And the other thing that we ask is that if you would kindly subscribe to this channel and get alerts when we post new content, that would help you know when we put out more educational content like this. And maybe you'll consider sharing us out to your friends and family on your social media so that your circle of friends can get educated just like you are today. So without further ado, let's jump into the breakdown of the Colonial Pipeline CEO's testimony in front of the United States Senate yesterday, which was June 8th, 2021. So let's jump into it right now. All right, so we're going to start off this video with the testimony from the CEO of Colonial Pipeline, and this particular question from Senator Peters. He asked a few things in this question, but he ends it with, "When do you think you'll be back to 100%?" And one of the things that I have pointed out in the various interviews that I've done on the news and in Forbes is that this is going to be a process that takes a long time. And I've mentioned this in previous videos, that when a company gets hacked, that you are going to spend a lot of time in the recovery process. And a lot of people are misinformed around this, and they think that a cyber attack cost is only something that is the number is only the number you pay the hackers to unlock the files for the ransomware, and that is not the case at all. That is the beginning of the costs, and the costs are usually 5, 6, 7 times that once you get all the right people involved, unless you want to be hacked again. I mean, you can absolutely do nothing, but almost 85% of the time where we see a company get hacked and then they do nothing, they get hacked again. The way these cyber criminals operate is they operate under the guise that basically they're making you aware of these security problems, and you didn't do enough to protect yourself from these security issues that you had, and you didn't do enough to protect the data. And we broke in, and now we're going to show you all your issues and all your vulnerabilities, but you're going to pay us first because we locked all your files. Now it's a crappy way to go about doing business, but that's how they operate. They think, or they go with the premise that they are helping you, and that they are helping you discover these vulnerabilities that you have. Just like they did with Colonial Pipeline here. The reason the Colonial Pipeline was hacked is because there was a VPN account on a legacy system that was no longer supposed to be being used, whatever that means. And there were credentials on the dark web for a particular user on within Colonial Pipeline. That person happened to no longer be there, but they were able to use those compromised credentials on the dark web to gain access to Colonial Pipeline's network through a legitimate VPN service that they had running. So this question has to do with when do you think you'll be basically back up 100%? And I think the CEO of Colonial Pipeline kind of nails it on the head here. And he basically reinforces what I've been saying on this channel for well over a year now. So let's take a listen.
For you to be 100%. People don't realize about cyber attacks and the repercussions of a cyber attack is it takes months and months and months, and in some cases what we've heard from other companies that have been impacted, years to restore your
He's
systems.
100% right.
Our focus that first week was to restore the critical systems that we needed on the IT side in order to safely and securely bring our pipeline system back up. So that's what we're focused on. You know, an example would be this week we're bringing back online 7 finance systems that we haven't had since the morning of May 7th. So again, the remediation is ongoing, and again, that's why you bring someone like Amanda in immediately, one, to help investigate the situation, but also to help restore what you've lost throughout the process. The keys are helpful, and we have used the keys, so they have been advantageous to us, but they're not perfect. And I think
now we're going to take a look at a question from Senator Portman around two-factor authentication, and let's take a look at how the CEO of Colonial Pipeline dances around the question from Senator Portman. And the thing that I'm kind of curious about on this question is that they know that they should be using two-factor authentication, yet they keep blaming this legacy VPN system. And I'm going to explain to you why that's important in a minute, but I'm going to let him talk, and I'll provide some commentary as he's talking. But really, you should be protecting several layers, and this is, in my opinion, a breach on quite a few layers, right? So one of them is definitely the network layer, the other one is definitely the perimeter layer, and the third one is the human layer. Clearly, you shouldn't have these accounts and these systems, these legacy systems, just sitting out there for people to gain access and control of. And that's the important thing I want you to keep in mind here as you listen to these comments. So here we go.
The decryption tool to be able to undo the harm that they did, that's how it normally works.
Okay, so he's talking about the fact that early on in the game, Colonial paid for the decryption tool, so they could you have that as a tool in their toolbox as they recovered from this event. They're asking questions around the effectiveness of the tool because, as I've told you on this channel before, these decryptor tools that these ransomware criminals give you don't always work. Especially with large files. So if like you're an engineer or somebody in construction, you have a lot of drawing files or DWG files or Revit files or things like that. Those are harder to decrypt once they get encrypted, especially by these poorly written ransomware tools. So if you do get hit with ransomware, even if you have like good backups or you don't have backups, if you're relying on the tool to get your data back, you're still kind of gambling with that fact. So let's see about this the rest of this question here.
And yet the decryption tool was not effective. Is that correct?
Ranking Member Portman, the encryption tool is an option that's made available to you. So when you're looking at bringing critical structure back up as quickly as you possibly can, you want to make every option available to you that you can. Mandy, it could be the best one to answer about how important the encryption tool was restoring the critical options we needed within the first.
But did the decryption tool work?
It has worked, yes, sir.
So Wall Street Journal story was inaccurate. It was effective.
Ranking Member Portman, I think that article came out pretty early on, so I would say that we know subsequently that the encryption tool actually does work to some degree. As I've stated earlier, it's not a perfect tool.
Okay, it was provided to you by the hackers, correct?
Ranking Member Portman, yes, sir, that's correct.
So there's also news reports about how this happened. as I said in my opening statement, there was a compromised password of a virtual private network or a VPN account. This account apparently did not use multi-factor authentication, which again is kind of just a basic cybersecurity hygiene.
That's a great point by Senator Portman. This is basic cybersecurity.
Making it harder for people to gain access. Prior to the attack, did your company require all employees to use multi-factor authentication?
Ranking Member Porton, in the case of this particular legacy VPN, it did only have single factor authentication. It was a complicated password, so I want to be clear on that. It was not a Colonial 123 type password.
That was a pot shot at SolarWinds.
Ongoing by Mandiant to try to determine how that material was compromised. But in our normal operation, we use an RSA token allowance in order to create authentication difficulties for remote access.
And that's the problem right there. You can't have these legacy systems out here that have old, outdated security and protocols in place. And it's just not okay for him to give this answer. I mean, I know that's his answer, and I know that's the reality and that's the facts, right? But this is not okay. Like this is purely a lack of good cybersecurity practices that you just left this system out here. And then you're also making the claim that for normal systems, we require an RSA token. Why was this system even out here? Like, why was that even on? Like, that's like, we built a better house, but we still have this little shack over here that you could still get in the back door and, kind of rob the house still. It doesn't make any sense, especially to me, why they would even, have two different types of systems. I kind of question whether or not they really have RSA in place, or they might have it in place now, but did they really have it in place before this event on May 7th? So let's see what else he has to say, and we'll wrap this segment up here.
So would your advice going forward be that multi-factor authentication ought to be used?
Ranking Member Porton, that's absolutely correct advice.
So TSA has given...
So there he goes. He's saying everybody should be using two-factor. And we've been saying it here on this channel all the time. Two-factor is one way you can prevent people from logging into your stuff. It's not a silver bullet. Again, there's layers to this. There's many layers. And I'm going to show you that in a second. I'm going to bring that up on the screen, and we're going to talk about it. All right, so we're going to talk about, and I have a video series that I'm in the process of creating. I know it's a little bit slower if some of you have been watching it than what I had anticipated. It's just unfortunately we got crazy busy with all these cyber attacks and everything that's going on. But here's a model that I have put together to kind of show you what this looks like from a layer standpoint. And I'll relate it to the Colonial pipeline attack here in a second. So if you think about everything as your assets in this center, and then you have these 6 areas that you need to consider when you're trying to protect these assets, right? And it doesn't matter what these assets are. These assets are usually a thing that's valuable to your company: intellectual property, drawings, data, systems, programming, you name it. It could be images if you're a photographer. These are the things that you create to make money. And your goal here is to protect this stuff. And it's not just the job of your IT company to do this stuff. This takes the whole entire company. Sometimes it takes a whole entire industry to really protect what we're trying to protect here. All right. And the different layers that we're going to talk about are: 1, the data layer; 2, the application layer. This is your software. These are the things that you probably are used to using every day on your computer. This is your endpoint. This means the actual system itself that you're using. Like, how do we protect that? How do we make sure that that is not the source of an attack? The network, okay? The network is one of the layers that Colonial Pipeline failed to take care of here, because they had this legacy VPN sitting out on their network. So they were not reviewing and analyzing what they had out on their network and determining whether or not that system needed to be beefed up from a security standpoint or just removed completely. It sounds to me, based on the testimony that I'm hearing, it should have been removed completely. The perimeter, again, this is a perimeter type of service and device. You're allowing people to come into your network from the outside. So who's watching the network to see who's coming in from the outside? And like, if you're doing this correctly, you're going to be aware that you have a legacy system out there that's not being supported, that's not being secured properly. This, to me, and the information we got in the testimony means that we have a failure in the perimeter, and nobody was doing what they were supposed to be doing when it comes to perimeter security. And finally, the human layer, right? The human layer comes into play here because the person's account who was compromised on the dark web is no longer at Colonial Pipeline. So it was a compromised credential of an employee who's no longer there. Now, why is this a human layer issue, in my opinion? Because they don't have a proper offboarding process with their HR that involves IT in that, okay, we let this person go, now remove all their access or remove all their accounts. And quite frankly, we see this very commonly when we go in and perform assessments on companies. I will tell you right now that over 90% of the time, we go in and we find credentials that haven't been logged into in a very long time, and we ask them, does this person still work here? And the answer is usually no. Where we identify accounts that, there's 20 employees, but there's 60 accounts, right? So there obviously has to be a number of accounts here that are for users or employees that no longer work here. So this is how you actually do cybersecurity and protect everything, what I have up on the screen here. And when you have a breach of 3 separate layers, this is how you get ransomware. Normally, if you have a breach in one of these layers, they can't use the other layers to breach you further. And they, quite frankly, needed the 3 layers to do what they did. If they only got past the human layer and somebody was watching the perimeter layer or the network layer and they had the right things in place, this probably wouldn't have happened, or it would have got caught earlier before it was such a big problem. But because they were able to penetrate the last 3 layers there, number 4, 5, and 6, that's why this went down the way that it did. So let's go back into some more questions. So in this question, he was asked about double extortion, which is something I highlighted on this channel. And I was probably one of the first people on YouTube to start talking about double extortion. Let's jump into what he has to say about double extortion. So, and the reason I'm going through all this is so you guys are aware of this and you see that everything that I talk about on this channel is real. We probably only hear about 1 out of every 20 ransomware attacks that actually happen in business. If you're not a public company, if you don't work with a public entity, there's really no reason for you to report a breach, even though by law you have to. Most companies don't. So let's jump into what he has to say.
And can you kind of tell us what kind of data they're talking about? Why that'd even be valuable for them or hurtful for that to be disclosed?
Senator, very, very good question, very important question. As part of the ransomware note, they tell you that they've encrypted information, that they've exfiltrated information. So we knew that they had exfiltrated information. We worked very closely with the FBI on that, and the FBI is probably the best entity to respond to that, since they're still, investigating the situation and getting closer apparently to, at least we hope, to the perpetrators themselves.
But would that be personal?
That's an interesting statement, that they think they're getting close to the perpetrators themselves. Wonder where that's going.
Information from your employees that would be valuable, or just trade secrets? Your public company.
Everything. They steal all that stuff.
I'm just kind of wondering what threat that represents to your entity or to your employees.
Senator, what we know about that material right now is it was exfiltrated off the share drive. So it contains a lot of different type of material. The good news is it was retrieved very quickly.
I love the share drive. So there's a lot of different information on there, because that's something I talk about too all the time. Is segregating your data, so when something like this happens, they can't just take everything from every different department that is under your company. And when I hear a CEO say something like a shared drive, that means to me that they use one drive for everything, like we see with a lot of companies where they just create one share, everything goes into that share, and they call it the shared drive or the N drive or the S drive or the R drive. And that's a big problem, because a lot of this stuff can be mitigated when you can only get to certain information based on your privilege level. So it's important. I know it takes time, and I know it takes somebody spending some hours to figure out who gets access to what and where should we move things and where should things be stored. But it's critically important, because when you do things like this, you're making it a lot harder for hackers to achieve what they're really trying to achieve. Today in the business world, and as you see with this video, we make it really easy for hackers to do what they do.
It was brought back in, and again, I think the FBI can talk a little bit more about that than I feel comfortable right now because of their investigation. But again, the fact that it was retrieved very quickly is helpful. We don't fully understand everything that's in it because of where it's been held since it was retrieved. But we have people obviously involved in the combined process who have been looking very closely at that data.
Okay, listen, I appreciate you coming in here and being so as forthright as you.
All right, so one of the things that I talk about too in this next question is incident response and doing things like fire drills or tabletop exercises. And this is something that we work on with our clients here at Exact IT Solutions. And believe it or not, it takes a lot of coaching to get companies to actually do this stuff and to see the importance around it. And when you have things like this going on, it will make my job a lot easier in the long run to get executives and CEOs to buy in. But I've had a lot of resistance over the years from companies thinking that this was a huge waste of time. And this is going to show you why this is not a huge waste of time. But the interesting thing is that I know a lot about Colonial Pipeline now, and they do incident response planning as part of their business. So like think about spill cleanups and things like that happen with gas and oil companies. They have incident response plans around those types of things, and they do exercises and they test this stuff. Specifically, I think the CEO here is conflating what they do between those different kind of simulations, and is basically saying, yeah, we do them, but not saying that we specifically do them for cybersecurity or ransomware. Then he gets put on the spot by a senator who says specifically for ransomware, and then he admits no. So it sounds like a lot of reactiveness went on here, where if you own a business and you're watching this, this is all stuff that you should be doing right now. This is how you prevent ransomware attacks. And if you're not, when you do get hit with ransomware, don't question why, because it's because you're not doing this stuff, and it's critically important that you start doing this stuff and do it with a cyber security focus, not for OSHA or not for any other, compliance or industry regulation that you might have to adhere to. So let's go into this series of questioning, and then we're going to wrap it up for this video today.
To Mandiant?
Right, but my question is, in your planning, did you have a plan for cybersecurity response that included guidance about ransomware?
Senator, specifically, no discussion about ransom and action to ransom.
And did your
Right.
team do tabletop drills, for instance, to go through an actual simulated cyber attack before this happened?
Senator, yes, we do participate in those with various groups, as well as do them on our own at Colonial.
Okay.
He just contradicted himself, because he said no specifically to ransomware, but we do these exercises with various entities. And it just bothers me, because a real simulation would cover things like ransomware attack, especially a cybersecurity focused one. So all through his testimony, I noticed that he was kind of conflating the fact that they do incident response planning, but I don't think they did it around cybersecurity. I think they did it around other areas of their business that may have touched on technology here and there, but for the most part, this wasn't a real cybersecurity tabletop exercise or fire drill. But quite frankly, the amount of money that this company has and the amount of resources that they have available to them, it's inexcusable to me that they are not at the point where they're doing actual cybersecurity fire drills, because tabletop exercises are the first thing that you do. And a lot of small companies and smaller companies that don't have a lot of resources will do tabletop exercises as a kind of simulation to their cybersecurity and incident response plan. When you're this big and you have this much riding on what you kind of provide to the world and the country, you should be at a point where you're already doing simulated fire drills where you're testing your systems and you know that they work. There's just all kinds of holes here. And the other thing is Mandiant is a great company, but the CEO of Colonial Pipeline keeps going back to the fact that they brought in Mandiant. You brought in Mandiant after you got hit with ransomware, and I guess that's what bothers me the most. You should have brought in Mandiant or any cybersecurity company that was worth anything to come in and should have done this stuff beforehand. So that's my warning to all CEOs, everyone out there who's watching this video. If you aren't doing this stuff right now, start doing it today, because if you're not doing it, you're going to end up like this guy. You're going to end up, in the news. If it gets out there that you got hit, you're going to end up, having to answer questions, and you're going to be labeled a victim, but you're also going to be labeled, irresponsible for not doing this stuff. And we're at a point in time where it's evident that companies need to start doing this stuff. So I'm going to wrap it up today, folks, and end this video. If you have any comments or questions or want me to answer or cover anything specifically from this from this testimony that the Colonial Pipeline CEO did, I'd be happy to answer them. Just drop your comments or questions in the comment section below with this video, and we'll see where things go. I'll probably do another analysis on some of this stuff, some kind of post-mortem, because there's a lot of good things coming out of this. We also had the JBS meat hack that happened recently. Fujifilms was hit recently. There's just been a ton of cyber attacks out there. So it's, I've already did a video probably 6 months ago that the cyber criminals were winning, and they're still winning, and they're still taking advantage of poorly written hardware and software that, through no fault of your own, is being put out there in the market for you to implement and buy and put into place. Couple that with, not so great cybersecurity practices and individuals responsible for doing these things that just aren't doing their job the proper way. I would highly recommend that everybody start doing this planning and also start working with multiple IT vendors around your cybersecurity. Like, we come in and we audit other IT companies and MSPs as part of what we do to tell companies whether or not they're working with somebody who's capable or not. Sometimes, it works out and those companies can make adjustments, or sometimes we come in and we work with that company to help them, get better around security while they still maintain a relationship with the company who built their network and provides their help desk type services and things like that. So that's it in a nutshell. We have a lot going on. I look forward to bringing you another video around this stuff very soon. Check out NTD News. I've been on NTD News a lot. They're a very good internet-based news station. It's really Newtang Dynasty. It's an Asian American owned news corporation out of New York. They have a ton of followers, and I've been featured on there like 4 or 5 times in the last month talking about these things. I will drop a link in the description below to those videos. Check those out. But remember, like our video, subscribe to our channel, and share our content to your friends and family. I would be very much appreciative of that. Thank you, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.